Have you ever been told without a word that you don't belong? That no matter what you've achieved, no matter what you've earned, someone can strip away your dignity with a single look at your skin, your clothes, or your silence? Picture this: a black woman, calm and composed, standing at the boarding gate with a valid first-class ticket. She is denied entry. The staff laugh. The supervisor waves her aside, and strangers look away. In that moment, she has a choice: swallow the humiliation, or call upon a power no one around her knows she has. What would you do if it were you? Would you shrink just to get through the day, or would you stand tall, knowing the truth that your presence is not negotiable and your dignity cannot be erased? This isn't just a story about flying. It's about power, justice, and the quiet courage to say no more. And when this woman makes one phone call, the entire airline discovers that underestimating her was the biggest mistake of all. If you're ready to feel her journey, to see yourself in her defiance, and to imagine what dignity looks like in action, stay with us. Like, share, and subscribe, and let's step together into the story. The overhead speakers crackled with a monotone announcement about boarding groups, but Selena Moore hardly heard it. She was standing in the first-class line at Chicago O'Hare International Airport, phone in hand, half-typing a message to her assistant about the hotel check-in in San Francisco. Her eyes were tired but focused. The upcoming meeting was one of the biggest of her career, a deal that could expand her consulting firm into new global markets. She had flown countless times before, had her share of delays and hiccups, but what was about to happen felt different, heavier. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see your ticket again." The voice cut through her thoughts. It wasn't just what was said, it was how flat, clipped, the kind of tone that already assumed she didn't belong here. Selena looked up to see a gate agent with a badge that read Ethan Cross. She offered a polite smile, though her lips parted mid-sentence. "Of course," she said softly, holding out her boarding pass. Ethan took the slip of paper and stared at it just a shade too long. His brow furrowed, not from confusion, but from something else, something she had learned to recognize over a lifetime. The pause of doubt, the search for a flaw, the quiet audit of whether she was legitimate. "And your ID?" he asked. Selena raised an eyebrow, but slid her driver's license from her leather wallet. "Here you go." While Ethan studied both documents, Selena let her eyes wander. The first-class line wasn't long, a woman in a gray pantsuit ahead of her, a man in cargo shorts behind her balancing coffee and a tablet. Everything had been smooth so far. TSA pre-check, no checked bags. Her assistant had even managed to secure her favorite seat by the window. 2A, her firm, Equirise Consulting, was on the brink of signing a partnership with a sustainable technology company. The pitch was ready, the team prepped. She wasn't nervous often, but this deal mattered. Ethan finally glanced up, giving her a quick once-over. Not the flirty look she used to get when she was younger, but a measuring look like he was trying to reconcile her brown skin, natural curls, and quiet confidence with the ticket that clearly said first class. "You sure you're in the right line?" "Ma'am," he asked. Selena blinked. For a moment, she thought maybe she'd misheard. Then a quiet laugh escaped her lips, not loud, more disbelief than amusement. "I'm sorry? What?" "This is priority boarding," Ethan said firmly. "First class." Her gaze met his, calm and steady. "Yes, I'm aware. That's what my ticket says." He shifted his eyes to the computer screen, then back to her. "Right. I'm going to need a moment." Before she could respond, the man in cargo shorts stepped up beside her. "Hey, is boarding open yet?" Ethan's entire tone shifted, his face lit with courtesy. Absolutely, sir. Welcome aboard. He didn't even glance at the man's ticket, just waved him through with a smile. Selina's stomach dropped as she watched the man stroll down the jet bridge. Her eyes flicked to the screen behind Ethan's desk. Same flight, same seat row. She already knew. Ethan looked back at her, avoiding her eyes. Looks like there's been a seat reassignment. I'm going to have to ask you to step to the side while I sort this out. Her voice was low but firm. Excuse me. That's not a reassignment. That's my seat. And that man just boarded with it. The look Ethan gave her was the kind you give someone who's making a scene, even though she wasn't raising her voice, wasn't swearing, wasn't doing anything but asking for fairness. Ma'am, please step aside so we can continue boarding. Selina did, not because he was right, but because she knew how quickly things could escalate when black women refused to comply. She stepped a few feet away, clutching her phone in one hand, tote bag at her feet. She breathed deeply, the same way she had in boardrooms where investors questioned if she really understood the software her own company built. The same way she had when a partner's spouse once mistook her for the help. Different city, same breath. But today, she told herself, today won't end like those moments. Is there a supervisor I can speak to? She asked calmly. Ethan sighed, as if she'd asked him to perform surgery. I already told you, ma'am. There's nothing I can do. I'm not asking what you can do, she said. I'm asking for your supervisor. Almost on cue. A woman appeared from behind the counter, mid-30s, hair pulled back in a bun, glasses slipping down her nose. Her name tag read Patricia Hale. Patricia's smile was polished, polite, but empty. Hi there. I understand there's a concern with your seat assignment. Selina nodded once. There's no concern. There's a mistake. I purchased seat 2A, confirmed it at check-in, showed both my ID and boarding pass here at the gate. That seat was just given to another passenger. Patricia tapped the keyboard. Her eyebrows pinched slightly, though her voice stayed smooth. Yes. I see your name here. Seat 2A, but it's been reassigned. Looks like there was a change in the system. Selina's tone sharpened. Without notifying me, Patricia hesitated. Selina pressed. Let's be honest. That man walked through without one question, without an ID check. I was standing right here. Patricia folded her hands on the desk. I'm afraid there's nothing available in first class anymore. We can offer you a premium economy seat and a voucher. Selina laughed once, short and cold. A voucher. Yes, for the inconvenience, Patricia said quickly. Inconvenience. Selina tilted her head. You've just told a black woman in front of a dozen passengers that she doesn't belong where she clearly does. You handed her seat to someone else. And now you're offering a coupon like this is a grocery store sale. Silence. Ethan pretended to read the screen, clearly hoping she would just disappear. The waiting area had gone quiet, eyes darting, whispers rising. Selina felt the weight of it, the judgment, the curiosity, the silent calculation of strangers wondering if she'd give in or make trouble. She inhaled again. Not rage, not despair, resolve. Her thumb hovered over her phone. This wasn't about a seat anymore. It was about dignity. Selina Moore had learned long ago that silence could be both weapon and shield. As she stood by the side of the boarding gate, watching other passengers move past her as if she were invisible, fragments of her past crept in like unwelcome reminders. They weren't memories she sought, but they came anyway, because moments like this had always been a thread in her life, stitched into the fabric of her success, into the steel of her patience. Her mother, Denise, used to tell her, "Baby, you'll have to work twice as hard to get half the credit. But that doesn't mean you stop. It just means you sharpen your edges." Denise was a nurse, the kind who worked overnight shifts at the county hospital, then came home to fix breakfast for her kids before sleeping a few hours and starting all over again. Selena remembered the sound of her mother's shoes squeaking on the linoleum floor when she returned, exhausted, but still humming gospel under her breath. Her father, Harold, drove long-haul trucks. He wasn't home much, but when he was, he'd sit Selena on his knee and tell her stories about the highways stretching farther than the eye could see. "The road will test you," he used to say, "but if you keep your hands steady, you'll always find your way." Growing up on the south side of Chicago, Selena carried both lessons, the grit of her mother's endurance and the steady vision of her father's patience. She was the kind of student who filled notebooks not only with class assignments, but with ideas, small sketches of inventions, notes on problems she saw in her neighborhood, lists of ways things could be better. By the time she hit high school, teachers noticed her focus. She didn't just want grades, she wanted solutions. She volunteered at the local library, tutored younger kids, and argued passionately in debate club about fairness and equity, even when the topics had nothing to do with her personally. When she won a scholarship to Harvard, her family cried so loudly the neighbors came over to check on them. Selena was only 18, dragging her one suitcase and a worn Bible her grandmother had given her. But she already understood what was waiting for her rooms where people would underestimate her, spaces where her very presence would be questioned. And she was right. In her freshman seminar, a classmate once asked her, "So what program are you in diversity outreach?" as if she hadn't earned her seat at a networking event. An older man assumed she was staff and asked her to clear his plate. She smiled through those moments because anger would have branded her difficult, and silence was easier to carry than the weight of stereotypes. But every slight, every assumption, became a brick she stacked into a foundation. She studied economics and computer science, disciplines that seemed worlds apart, but, to her, fit together like gears. She wanted to build systems, real systems, that worked fairly, that couldn't be manipulated by the quiet biases people pretended didn't exist. After graduation, Selena joined a major consulting firm. She learned quickly that the polished language of meritocracy often hid the cracks in how companies treated people. She sat in conference rooms where executives debated metrics without ever considering the employees who lived under them. She kept her head down, delivered flawless reports, and watched. One night, after yet another meeting where a manager dismissed her concerns about hiring practices, she went home and opened her laptop. By dawn, she had drafted the business plan for what would become Equirise Consulting. It started small. One office, a handful of staff who believed in her vision. She didn't pitch herself as a diversity trainer. She built Equirise as a data-driven audit firm, the kind that Fortune 500 companies couldn't ignore. They didn't just give speeches about fairness, they tore apart systems, uncovered bias in hiring, promotion, pay, and treatment, and forced change, backed by numbers. The work was grueling, sometimes dangerous to her reputation. Clients often hired them for appearances, hoping Equirise would give them a stamp of approval. Instead, Selena made sure they confronted the truth. Some canceled contracts. Others threatened lawsuits. But more and more realized that ignoring inequity was worse than fixing it. Selena built her reputation on calm persistence. She wasn't flashy. She didn't chase headlines. She preferred results over applause. And it worked. Within a decade, Equirise became a national leader, its logo appearing alongside global corporations. But the work left scars. She remembered one pitch meeting in Dallas. She was mid-sentence, explaining an algorithm designed to detect bias in employee evaluations when an investor interrupted, leaning back with a smirk. "Do you even understand the tech behind this, Ms. Moore?" he asked, as if she hadn't authored the code herself. She smiled, finished her explanation, and later won the contract. But in private, she cried, not because she doubted herself, but because she was exhausted from always having to prove her own legitimacy. Then there was the dinner in Boston, where a partner's wife mistook her for the help. Selina had been wearing a navy suit and pearls, the same as half the room, but her skin told a different story to those who didn't look closely. She said nothing then, choosing not to embarrass her host. But she remembered. She always remembered. And now, standing in O'Hare, watching Ethan Cross wave a white man past without a single question while she was told to step aside, it all flooded back. She wasn't angry in the way people expected. She was steady, controlled, but inside, the old ache pressed against her ribs, the ache of containment, of swallowing her truth to survive another day. Selina adjusted her tote strap on her shoulder, shifting her weight onto one heel. Her phone buzzed in her hand. A text from her assistant reminded her of the hotel reservation in San Francisco. She typed a quick reply. "Hold that. May need to change plans." She looked around at the boarding area. Families juggling kids and strollers. A group of college students laughing too loudly. A businessman tapping his laptop, clearly impatient. And then her eyes caught a woman sitting nearby, maybe mid-60s, with silver hair and deep brown skin. The woman met her gaze and gave a small nod, almost imperceptible, as if to say, "I know. I've been there too." That nod gave Selina strength. She thought of her team Adrian Blake, her sharp-minded general counsel who never lost an argument, Marisol Vega, her COO who could turn chaos into order, and Darius Cole, her young data lead who believed technology could be a force for justice. They had all looked to her for leadership, trusted her to hold the line when things got hard. And here she was, standing on the edge of another test. It wasn't the first time her belonging had been questioned. It wouldn't be the last. But something in her had shifted over the years. She was tired of letting moments like this fade quietly into the background. She touched the screen of her phone again, scrolling through her contacts until her finger hovered over Adrian's number. Not yet, she told herself. Not here in the noise of the boarding gate, but soon. Very soon. Selina straightened her spine, exhaled slowly, and let her face settle into the calm mask she had perfected. It wasn't about a seat. It was about a system. And she was ready to confront it, no matter how inconvenient, no matter how uncomfortable it made those who wanted her silent. When the announcement for final boarding echoed across the speakers, she remained where she was watching, waiting, gathering herself for what came next. Because this time, she wouldn't simply move aside. She would stand. The gate area quieted for a brief moment as the boarding line thinned. A mother soothed her restless child. A businessman muttered into his Bluetooth earpiece, and the voice of the announcer echoed again. Final call for passengers in Group 1, Flight 728 to San Francisco. Selina Moore remained seated. Her boarding pass rested in her lap. The words First Class, Seat 2O, printed in bold black letters. Undeniable proof of her right to be there. Yet Ethan Cross's eyes had carried something stronger than ink disbelief that someone like her belonged at the front of the plane. It wasn't new. It wasn't even surprising. but each time it still scraped at her spirit. She sat still, her pulse steady, but the familiar weight pressed into her chest like a hand trying to push her down. From the corner of her eye, she noticed a young flight attendant step off the jet bridge. She couldn't have been more than 24. Her ponytail pulled tight, her uniform perfectly pressed. She glanced at Selina, then quickly away. Selina recognized the look. It wasn't malice. It was fear. Fear of stepping out of line. Fear of seeing wrong and not knowing how to name it. Selina adjusted her jacket and rose from her seat. She walked toward the podium where Ethan and Patricia Hale stood. Patricia, the supervisor, had arrived a few minutes earlier, summoned by Ethan's subtle hand gesture. Selina could already hear the rehearsed tone in Patricia's voice before she spoke. "Ma'am," Patricia said smoothly, "there seems to be an issue with your reservation. We'll need to verify some additional information." Selina held her gaze. "My ticket is valid. My ID matches. What additional information could you possibly need?" Patricia smiled thinly. The kind of smile that wasn't kindness, but control. "Sometimes our system flags unusual bookings. It's a security precaution." The words landed like stones. Unusual. That's what she was. Wasn't it? To them, a black woman in first class was always unusual. Selina inhaled slowly, forcing her voice to remain calm. "Your system is not the issue. Your assumptions are." Ethan shifted uneasily beside Patricia, his earlier confidence cracking just a little. Passengers nearby began to notice. A man in a gray suit frowned, whispering something to his companion. A teenager raised her phone, pretending to scroll, but clearly recording. The air thickened with attention. Selina felt every eye pressing against her. Part of her wanted to shrink, to avoid the spectacle. But another part, the part that had carried her through boardrooms, lawsuits, and years of dismissal, rose stronger. Patricia lowered her voice. "If you don't cooperate, ma'am, we'll have to deny you boarding. This is for the safety of all passengers. Safety." The word stabbed sharper than the rest. Safety had been used as an excuse against her people for centuries. Safety to justify segregation. Safety to excuse brutality. Safety to rationalize exclusion. Now, here it was again, dressed in corporate uniform. Selina's chest tightened. She remembered the stories her grandmother told about being forced to the back of the bus in Alabama. She remembered her mother, denied promotion after promotion in that hospital. She remembered herself at 19, humiliated at a campus party where someone called her quota. The pattern stretched across generations, and here it was, alive at gate C14. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. For a brief second, her hand trembled against the boarding pass. The tremor was small, but she noticed it. Inside, a storm brewed: anger, grief, exhaustion, all colliding. She wanted to scream. She wanted to walk away. She wanted to vanish. But instead, she breathed. One deep, grounding breath. She steadied her hands. "Patricia," she said quietly, but firmly, "you're making a mistake." Patricia's eyes flickered, a hint of unease breaking through. Yet before she could respond, a voice rose from behind. "Excuse me," the silver-haired woman Selina had noticed earlier said, standing from her seat. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had spent decades being ignored and had learned how to command space. "I've been watching. That woman has every right to board. Stop wasting her time." The room shifted. Whispers grew louder. A few passengers nodded in agreement. The young flight attendant's eyes darted nervously, her lips parting as if she might say something. Selina felt a spark ignite inside her chest. Not relief, not victory, but recognition. Someone saw her. Someone dared to name the wrong. Patricia stiffened, her smile faltering. "Ma'am, please remain seated. We're handling this." But the tide had turned. The teenager's phone angled more clearly now. No longer pretending. The man in the gray suit spoke louder. "She's got a ticket." "What's the problem?" Selina stood taller. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The calm steel in it carried farther than shouting ever could. "The problem is not my reservation," she said. "The problem is the bias in how you've chosen to treat me, and I will not be silent about it." For a long moment, no one moved. The announcement system crackled again, repeating the final boarding call. Somewhere, a baby cried. But in that small circle around gate C14, the silence was heavy, almost sacred. Selina turned, meeting the eyes of the silver-haired woman, then the teenager, then the businessman. She saw it in their faces, the spark of shared recognition, the weight of knowing they were witnessing more than a travel delay. Inside her, the ache still pulsed. She was tired, so tired, of carrying this burden. But standing there, she also felt something else resolve. She looked back at Patricia and Ethan. "I suggest you reconsider." Neither moved, but their silence was answer enough for now. Selina returned to her seat, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. Her phone buzzed again in her hand. This time, she didn't hesitate. She opened her contacts and pressed Adrian Blake's name. As the call rang, she thought, "This isn't just about me anymore. This is about the system they've built. And tonight, the system begins to crack." She held the phone to her ear, waiting for Adrian's voice. Her heart was steady. Her resolve was unshakable. The final boarding door closed with a metallic thud. Selina stayed behind, not because she couldn't board, but because she had chosen a different flight, a fight she would no longer postpone. Adrian Blake answered on the second ring. His voice was sharp but calm, the voice of someone used to hearing bad news and knowing exactly what to do with it. "Selina, what's happened?" Selina took a slow breath, letting her eyes wander across the now quiet gate. The passengers had already boarded, the door to the jet bridge sealed. Only the hum of fluorescent lights and the clatter of a cleaning cart filled the silence. "They denied me boarding," she said evenly, "with a valid first-class ticket." No explanation beyond the usual security concerns. Adrian cursed under his breath. "Where are you now?" "Still at gate C14. "O'Hare," Selina replied. "Supervisor's name is Patricia Hale. Gate agent Ethan Cross. Both refused to let me board." "Are you safe?" "Yes." Selina's tone carried no panic, just clarity. "But I'm not letting this go. Not this time." There was a pause on the line. Then Adrian's voice dropped into the register she knew so well. The voice of strategy, of lawsuits, of calculated storms. "Do you want me to pull the trigger?" Selina closed her eyes for a moment. She remembered the nod from the silver-haired woman. The teenager's phone tilted upward like a witness that wouldn't forget. She thought about all the time she had swallowed these moments whole, bearing them beneath professionalism, telling herself that speaking out would cost too much. But not tonight. "Yes," she said. "Trigger it." Adrian didn't ask twice. "Understood. I'll call Marisol and Darius. We'll assemble within the hour. Sit tight. Selina. By morning, this airline will wish they had simply let you take your seat." When the call ended, Selina sat very still, her phone warm in her hand. She felt the ripple of something larger than herself begin to move. It wasn't just a personal insult anymore. It was about systems, and she knew systems better than anyone. She walked slowly toward the wide window that overlooked the runway. Outside, the plane she was supposed to be on was already taxiing. Its lights blinked against the night, fading into the distance until it lifted into the sky and disappeared. Selina pressed her palm against the cold glass. She whispered to herself, "You can take the seat from me, but you can't take my power." Back in downtown Chicago, Adrian was already at work. His apartment lights flickered as he opened encrypted files, each labeled with the airline's name. Equirise had been compiling reports for months, anonymous employee complaints, discrepancies in customer service data, whispered accounts of misconduct. Selina had insisted they wait, gather enough proof to be undeniable. Tonight gave them the spark to light the pile. Marisol Vega answered Adrian's call within seconds. "What's happened?" she demanded. "They blocked Selina from boarding. First class. Confirmed ticket. Supervisor Patricia Hale. Gate agent Ethan Cross. On the other end." Marisol's voice hardened. "Then it's time. Darius Cole, young but brilliant, joined the conference line. I've already flagged their employee review data. There's a pattern of bias complaints buried under generic HR responses. If we release this alongside Selina's testimony, it's going to explode." Adrian leaned back in his chair. "Selina wants the full rollout. No holding back." "Then we move tonight," Marisol said. "We've waited long enough." Meanwhile, Selina remained at the airport, calm but alert. Patricia Hale approached once more, her expression taut. "Ma'am, you'll need to vacate the gate area. The flight has departed." Selina turned, her eyes steady. "I'm aware." She picked up her tote and slung it over her shoulder. "And so are you." Patricia frowned, clearly unsettled by the tone. But she didn't reply. She simply turned back to the podium, tapping at the screen, pretending to be busy. Selina walked away without another glance, her heels clicking softly against the tile. She moved through the terminal with measured steps, her mind racing through what was to come. She thought of the people who would see the teenager's video once it surfaced. She thought of the employees who had sent Equirise their quiet pleas for help, too scared to speak publicly. She thought of the silver-haired woman who dared to nod, daring to witness. She thought of all the passengers who had looked away. By the time Selina reached the exit, her car was waiting. The driver opened the door with a polite nod, and she slid into the back seat. The city lights blurred past as they pulled onto the freeway. For a moment, she leaned her head back and closed her eyes. Exhaustion tugged at her, the kind that came not from the day's events, but from years of caring too much. Yet beneath it, a pulse of resolve throbbed steady, undeniable. Her phone buzzed again. Adrian's text flashed across the screen. Press release and draft. Leak package queued. Confirm go. Selina typed back one word, go. And with that, the machinery began. In a downtown newsroom, a young journalist received an anonymous tip linking her to a cache of documents about the airline's practices. In a union office, employees whispered that maybe, finally, their voices would be heard. On social media, the teenager's shaky video uploaded, captioned simply, "They wouldn't let her board." Guess why? Within minutes, views climbed, comments poured in, hashtags emerged. Boss, seat denied, Doros flying while black. Back in her car, Selina watched the numbers tick upward on her screen. But she didn't smile. She didn't feel victory. She felt the weight of responsibility, Viral outrage could be fleeting. Real change required strategy. And she had already decided this wouldn't end with sympathy. It would end with reform. She called Adrian again. "When the story breaks," she said, "make sure they know this isn't just about me. Make sure they see the data, the systemic failures, the patterns, already in motion." Adrian replied, "By morning, the world will see it all." Selena exhaled slowly. She looked out the window at the glowing skyline, towers piercing the night. Somewhere in those offices, executives would soon wake to chaos. She almost pitied them, almost. But then she remembered Patricia's thin smile, Ethan's dismissive eyes, the word unusual echoing in her mind. No, she thought. Pity has no place here. Justice does. As the car rolled on, Selena whispered the words that had carried her through every storm. Stay steady, stay sharp, stay true. And she knew, deep in her bones, that tonight wasn't just the night she was denied a seat. It was the night she would claim the sky. By dawn, the city was already awake with noise traffic, coffee shops buzzing, phones lighting up with headlines that no one at the airline had seen coming. Selena Moore sat in her office, blinds half open, watching the sky shift from dark indigo to the pale gold of morning. Her phone vibrated nonstop. Every time she glanced down, the numbers told the same story. The video had gone viral. The clip showed Ethan Cross at the podium, Patricia Hale at his side, and Selena standing with her boarding pass. Her words calm, clear, undeniable, echoed through every timeline. "The problem is not my reservation. The problem is the bias in how you've chosen to treat me." 12 seconds long. That was all it took. 12 seconds to ignite a storm. Cable networks replayed the clip with panels of commentators debating its meaning. Morning radio hosts dissected it between songs. Social media was ablaze with hashtags. Site denied. Justice in the sky. Selena Moore. Adrian Blake entered the office carrying 2 cups of coffee and a folder thick with papers. His tie was loose, his eyes shadowed, but his posture was steady. "We've got the data package ready. HR complaints, customer service disparities, financial discrepancies tied to settlements they buried. It's airtight." Selena accepted the coffee, wrapping her hands around the warmth. She hadn't slept, but her mind was sharper than ever. Good. Timing. "We push at noon. Let the video saturate the morning cycle first. Then we drop the documents. The world will already be watching." Marisol Vega joined them moments later, her blazer crisp, her hair tied back. She laid her tablet on the table and tapped the screen. Charts, graphs, and highlighted documents filled the display. This isn't just about one gate agent or one supervisor. It's systemic. Look here, employees flagged bias incidents and performance reviews 5 years running. All logged, all dismissed. Darius Cole's voice came from the speakerphone. He was already at Equirize's data center, running checks, and their customer service data shows complaints from black passengers were 3 times more likely to be closed without resolution. That's not chance. That's design. Selena listened, her expression calm but resolute. "When we release this, it can't look like revenge. It has to look like truth. We're not tearing them down. We're showing the world what's been hidden." Adrian nodded. "Agreed. But make no mistake. This will tear them down. Truth usually does." At Airline headquarters downtown, panic was setting in. CEO Robert Lang and his executive team huddled in a glass-walled conference room. The video looped silently on a large screen. Robert rubbed his temples, his voice tight with frustration. "Who is she? His VP of Communications, Linda Shaw, hesitated before replying. Selena Moore, CEO of Equirise Consulting, highly respected, national profile. This isn't just a customer. She has influence. Robert's face paled. And we denied her boarding. Linda's silence was answer enough. The head of operations, Frank Delaney, slammed his hand on the table. It was a mistake at the gate. Train the staff, issue an apology. We move on. But Linda shook her head. This isn't going away. The clip already hit 10 million views. She hasn't even spoken publicly yet. And when she does, people will listen. Back at Equirise, Selena prepared to do exactly that. Cameras were setting up in her office. A young producer from a major network adjusted the lighting while Marisol coached the team on messaging. Selena herself sat quietly, scrolling through the flood of messages on her phone. Some were from strangers, thanking her for standing firm. Others were painful confessions. This happened to me last year in Dallas. They pulled me off a flight with no reason. I thought I was alone. Selena's chest tightened as she read them. Every story was another weight, another reminder of how deep the problem ran. When the red light on the camera blinked on, she didn't read from the notes Marisol had prepared. She spoke from her heart. I didn't want this moment. I didn't seek it. I wanted to board a flight, like anyone else. But when I was told my presence was unusual, when I was denied what I had paid for and rightfully owned, I knew this wasn't just about me. It was about a system that says some bodies belong and others don't. I'm not here to demand pity. I'm here to demand accountability for every person who has been told they don't belong, for every passenger humiliated in silence, for every employee forced to swallow the truth because speaking out cost too much. Today, silence ends. Her words spread across screens within minutes. Headlines lit up. Selena Moore speaks out. Clips of her interview trended alongside the viral video. The narrative shifted from a single incident to a movement. At headquarters, Robert Lang watched the broadcast with dread. His legal counsel leaned in and whispered, "If she releases what we think she has, we're exposed. Completely." Robert exhaled shakily. "Then we need to control the story. Now." But it was too late. At exactly noon, Adrian hit send. Thousands of pages of internal documents, anonymized employee testimonies, statistical breakdowns, all released simultaneously to major outlets and uploaded to Equirise's site. The package had a simple title: The Equity Report Airline Practices in the Shadows. The impact was immediate. News alerts pinged across phones. Anchors spoke with urgency. Breaking news: systemic bias uncovered in major airline. Documents reveal years of complaints ignored. Social media caught fire. The teenager's video was now paired with data charts and whistleblower statements. Hashtags multiplied. Yours Equity Report. Systemic bias. Justice in the sky. Selena sat back in her chair, watching the storm unfold. She felt no glee, only gravity. She thought of her mother's words, "Sharpen your edges." This was what those edges had been for. Adrian leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "They'll come after us. Call it a smear campaign. Claim the data is flawed." Selena nodded. "Let them. The truth will outlast their denial." Marisol checked her tablet. "Stock prices are already dropping. Investors are nervous. Employees are leaking even more." Selena turned her gaze to the window, where the city pulsed with life below. She spoke quietly, almost to herself. "This isn't about a company losing money. It's about a country deciding what dignity is worth." That night, as the story dominated headlines, a candlelight vigil formed outside the airline's headquarters. passengers, employees, community leaders, all gathered with signs that read, "Everyone belongs and dignity has no class section." The silver-haired woman from Gate C-14 was there, holding a small sign. I saw it happen. For Selena, the crisis wasn't just public, it was personal. But she had made her choice. And as she closed her eyes that night, finally laying down to rest, she knew the storm had only begun. The morning after the equity report dropped, the airline's headquarters resembled a fortress under siege. Reporters camped outside the revolving doors. Investors dialed relentlessly, demanding answers. Employees whispered in hallways, afraid of being overheard. Inside the executive suite, Robert Lang faced a room thick with tension. "We need to move fast," he said, his voice strained but commanding. "We cannot allow this narrative to define us." Frank Delaney leaned forward. "We hit back. Call it a misinterpretation. Discredit her data. We've handled activists before. This is no different." Linda Shaw shook her head sharply. "It is different." "Frank, she isn't an activist shouting from the sidelines. She's a CEO with receipts. Equirise isn't a blog. It's a consultancy Fortune 500 companies trust. If we go after her, we look like bullies." Robert rubbed his forehead. Torn. "Then what? We just take the beating." Their legal counsel, a tall man named Jonathan Pierce, interjected. "We stall. Announce an internal review. Hire a third-party firm we control. Buy time until the outrage fades." But time wasn't on their side. The equity report had ignited something larger. Civil rights groups were calling for congressional hearings. Employees were leaking internal Slack messages that revealed offhand jokes about profiling and keeping the cabins clean. The airline's brand wasn't just tarnished, it was radioactive. Meanwhile, in Oakland, Selena Moore and her team gathered around a long wooden table in the Equirise office. The room buzzed with energy and exhaustion. Adrian Blake set his laptop down, his face tight. They're assembling their counterattack. Talking points are already circulating. Misinterpretation of data. Operational errors. They're planning to paint you as opportunistic. Selena leaned back, unbothered. Let them. The more they minimize, the more reckless they'll sound. Marisol Vega tapped her screen. "We also have something they don't allies inside. 2 supervisors from Chicago just sent files, flight schedules, ID check logs, handwritten notes from staff meetings. It corroborates everything." Darius Cole's voice came through the speakerphone again, steady but charged. "And I just finished analyzing the financials they tried to hide. Settlements tied to passenger discrimination cost them over $32 million in the past 5 years. They called it customer disruption fees." "That's a smoking gun." Selena nodded slowly. "Release it. Tonight. Drip by drip. Let them fight yesterday's fire while tomorrow's ignites." As evening fell, another wave of documents surfaced online. Screenshots of internal emails where executives discussed profiling concerns. Settlement figures with line items deliberately mislabeled. It painted a picture not of accidents, but of a culture that tolerated bias because it was cheaper to pay off victims than to change. Back at headquarters, Robert Lang slammed his fist against the table. "Who is feeding her this?" Linda replied quietly. "Your own people. They don't trust leadership anymore." The board of directors convened an emergency meeting. Some demanded Robert's resignation. Others pleaded for a settlement with Selena. But Robert, pride wounded, refused. "If we bow now, we're finished." While executives scrambled, Selena found herself facing an unexpected storm of her own. Not all the attention was supportive. Pundits on certain networks labeled her a troublemaker and a woman playing the race card for profit. Online trolls flooded her inbox with threats. Late that night, Selena sat alone in her office, scrolling through hateful messages. Her hands tightened around her phone. For a moment, doubt seeped in. Was she fueling division instead of healing it? Would this fight consume everything she'd built? Her phone buzzed. A message from her mother appeared. You carry more than yourself in this fight, but you don't carry it alone. Selena closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. The words steadied her. She wasn't alone. The flood of supportive messages proved that. Strangers sharing their stories, former employees reaching out to thank her, and her team unwavering, relentless, stood ready at her side. The next morning, she walked into the Equirise common room where the entire staff had gathered. Tired eyes looked back at her, but in them she saw resolve. She spoke simply. They're attacking us because they're afraid of truth, afraid of change. But I need you to remember, this isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. Every document we share, every word we speak, it has to be rooted in integrity. No shortcuts, no exaggerations, only truth. The room erupted in quiet applause. Meanwhile, the pressure on the airline intensified. Stock prices plummeted another 18%. Congressional leaders publicly demanded hearings. Major corporate partners suspended contracts. The brand that once prided itself on luxury was now synonymous with exclusion. Robert Lang tried to seize control with a press conference. Cameras flashed as he stepped to the podium, flanked by executives. He offered an apology, carefully worded, carefully rehearsed. We acknowledge the concerns raised, he said stiffly. We are reviewing our policies to ensure fairness for all passengers. But journalists pressed harder. Do you acknowledge systemic discrimination? One shouted. Robert hesitated. His silence was louder than any denial. The clip spread instantly. He won't say the word. Back at Equirise, Adrian smirked grimly. They just dug their own grave. Selena, however, didn't smile. She felt the weight of the moment. This isn't about graves. It's about doors. We're not just closing theirs. We're opening new ones. The escalation was no longer just corporate. It was cultural. Communities across the country organized rallies at airports. Protesters carried signs that read "Flying while black is real" and "Accountability now." Travelers posted videos of their own mistreatment, each one echoing Selena's stand. But in the shadows, the airline's legal team plotted one last desperate move. Jonathan Pierce drafted a lawsuit, accusing Equirise of defamation. It was a gamble, high risk, high stakes. He believed it might scare Selena into silence. The papers were filed Friday morning. Headlines screamed, "Airline sues equity firm in viral discrimination case" at Equirise. The team read the news in stunned silence. Adrian cursed under his breath. They're going nuclear. Selena stood still, her face unreadable. Then, calmly, she said, "Good. Let them put it on record. The courtroom is the one place where truth can't be spun." Her words settled over the room like armor. The battle had escalated from airports and headlines to courts and boardrooms. And as Selena looked around at her team, she knew one thing for certain: this fight was no longer about her seat. It was about who got to take their rightful place in the sky and who would be told they didn't belong. The lawsuit was intended to intimidate, but it backfired almost instantly. By the time the ink dried on the filing, news anchors across the country were calling it corporate bullying in broad daylight. Opinion pieces sprang up overnight. $1 billion airline versus one woman and her truth. Talk shows debated whether the airline had just handed Selena Moore the moral high ground. Inside Equirise headquarters, The team braced for the storm. Adrian Blake stood at the whiteboard, sketching out possible legal defenses while interns scurried with stacks of documents. Marisol Vega leaned against the window, arms folded, watching the city below. "They think they can scare us into silence," she said, voice edged with steel. Selena sat at the head of the table, calm in posture but fierce in her eyes. "This isn't about scaring me. It's about warning everyone else who might dare to speak up. If we cave, they'll think truth is negotiable." Adrian set down his marker. "We won't cave. Their lawsuit is weak. We have data, evidence, witnesses, but—" He hesitated, glancing around the room. "It's going to get personal. They'll drag your name through the mud. They'll question your integrity, your background, maybe even your family." For a brief second, Selena's jaw tightened. She thought of her mother, of her younger brother who had texted her late at night saying, "I saw Twitter. This is bigger than us. You okay?" She had told him she was fine, but now she felt the weight of what Adrian meant. "Let them," she replied softly. "I don't need to be perfect. I need to be honest." The following morning, the first hearing was scheduled. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse. Protesters held signs reading "Truth Takes Flight" and "Stand with Selena." Reporters swarmed, shoving microphones at her as she walked up the steps flanked by Adrian and Marisol. "Ms. Moore, are you afraid this lawsuit will destroy Equirise?" one shouted. Selena stopped briefly, turned, and answered calmly, "No lawsuit can destroy truth. That's all we're bringing to the table. Truth." The clip went viral within minutes, further undercutting the airline's narrative. Inside the courtroom, Jonathan Pierce, the airline's legal counsel, presented their case with the swagger of someone used to winning. Equirise Consulting engaged in a deliberate smear campaign. He declared, "Their so-called equity report cherry-picked data, exaggerated incidents, and inflicted irreparable harm on a respected brand." Adrian rose to respond, voice measured and steady. "Your Honor, what they call a smear campaign, we call accountability. These aren't opinions. These are their documents, their settlements, their employees' voices. If the truth damages their brand, perhaps it's the brand that should change, not the truth." Gas rippled through the courtroom. Even the judge raised an eyebrow at Adrian's precision. Over the next hours, Selena watched as her team dismantled the airline's claims piece by piece. Darius Cole's data analysis was presented with clarity, showing patterns no coincidence could explain. Marisol read statements from whistleblowers, their identities protected, their words powerful. When the hearing adjourned, reporters rushed to broadcast the highlights. Headlines declared Airline on defense as evidence mounts. Back at Equirise. The mood was buoyant, but Selena stayed grounded. She reminded her team, "We're not here to win a spectacle. We're here to win justice." Yet outside their walls, the court of public opinion was already delivering its verdict. Talk shows praised Selena's composure. Community leaders cited her as an example of how to confront systemic injustice. Even skeptical commentators admitted the airline's case looked flimsy at best, but the backlash against the airline wasn't limited to media chatter. Ticket sales plunged. A prominent senator announced plans to hold hearings on discrimination in air travel, and perhaps most damaging of all, one of the airline's largest investors publicly withdrew support, citing serious concerns about governance and accountability. Inside headquarters, Robert Lang fumed. "She's destroying us one headline at a time." He snapped, pacing the room. "We need to double down." Linda Shaw, weary and pale, finally pushed back. "Robert, Doubling down is why we're here. The more we fight, the worse it looks. We should be negotiating, admitting fault. Robert's glare was icy. Admitting fault means admitting failure. And I don't fail. But cracks were spreading even within his own team. Quietly. 2 board members reached out to Equirise to explore a private settlement. They knew the tide was turning, and survival might depend on surrender. Selina, however, wasn't interested in a quiet exit. She made that clear during a nationally televised interview a week later, sitting in a simple studio chair, no flashy backdrop, just her and the camera. She spoke directly to the audience. This isn't about one flight, one gate, or one lawsuit. This is about a culture that tells certain people they don't belong. I won't be silenced, because this fight isn't mine alone. It belongs to everyone who's ever been told to step aside, to wait quietly, to take less than they deserve. We're not asking for charity. We're demanding dignity. The words struck deep. Viewers flooded comment sections with messages of support. Donations poured into advocacy groups fighting for equity in travel and workplaces. The airline's reputation sank further, now seen not just as flawed, but defiant in its refusal to confront reality. In quiet moments, Selina still wrestled with fatigue. Some nights she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she had unleashed something she couldn't contain. She thought about the faces of strangers at the airport, the silver-haired woman who gave her water, the teenager who had posted the first video. They hadn't asked for this fight either. And yet, together, they had sparked a reckoning. One evening, as she walked out of the office, she found a handwritten letter taped to the glass door. It was from a flight attendant who had worked for the airline for 12 years. I've seen things I'm ashamed I didn't stop. Watching you stand your ground gave me courage. Today, I filed my first report. Thank you for reminding me that silence is not neutral. Selina read the words twice, then folded the paper carefully and placed it in her bag. It was moments like this small, human, unmeasured by headlines that reminded her why she fought. By the end of the month, the airline's lawsuit was collapsing under its own weight. Judges grew impatient with their lack of evidence. Public support evaporated, and behind closed doors, Robert Lang faced a mutiny from his own board. But Selina wasn't celebrating yet. She knew the story wasn't finished. The fight wasn't just about one airline. It was about reshaping an entire industry. And as she prepared for the next chapter, she carried with her the certainty that truth, once spoken aloud, could never be silenced again. The boardroom of the airline no longer carried the air of confidence it once had. Instead, it smelled faintly of panic, coffee gone cold, papers strewn across the long mahogany table, voices raised not in strategy, but in blame. Robert Lang sat at the head, face flushed, pounding the table with his fist. This company has flown through oil crises, recessions, and strikes, and now one woman, one video, is tearing it apart. Unacceptable. Linda Shaw exhaled heavily, pinching the bridge of her nose. She looked worn down, her once pristine suits now wrinkled by endless hours of damage control. Robert, it's not just one video. It's years of ignored complaints finally finding a spotlight. It's our employees leaking documents, customers posting stories, investors asking questions. Selina Moore didn't invent these problems. She exposed them. The room grew tense. Frank Delaney, the grizzled head of operations, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He had been loyal to Robert for decades, but even he couldn't deny what Linda said. "Maybe she has a point," Frank muttered. "We've been patching cracks with duct tape for years. Maybe it's time to address the foundation." Robert's eyes burned with fury. "Foundation? Don't lecture me about foundations. Frank, I built this airline from regional scraps into a global carrier. I know what it takes to win. What I won't do is bow to some activist consultant trying to make a name off my back." But the words sounded hollow, even to him. Behind his bluster, Robert felt the shifting tide. 2 board members had called him privately, questioning his judgment. A third had stopped returning his calls altogether. Worse still, whispers had begun shareholders were contemplating a vote of no confidence. Meanwhile, at Equirise, Selina and her team sensed the cracks widening. Adrian Blake laid out a map of the airline's leadership on the conference room screen. "Here's what we know. At least 3 executives are wavering. We've heard from insiders that they're frustrated with Robert's refusal to consider reform. If the pressure keeps mounting, they'll turn on him." Selina listened intently, then asked quietly, "Do we want them to turn on him, or do we want them to turn toward change?" The question hung in the room. Marisol Vega leaned forward. "If they just replace Robert with another carbon copy, nothing changes. We need commitments measurable, structural commitments." Selina nodded slowly. "Exactly. This isn't about watching a man fall. It's about making a system rise." That night, unable to sleep, Selina found herself replaying the day in her mind. She thought about the protesters outside the courthouse, about the young woman who had written in saying she finally felt seen. But she also thought about the airline employees whose paychecks depended on a company now spiraling. She whispered to herself, almost like a prayer, "There has to be a way where dignity doesn't mean destruction." Back in the airline's glass tower headquarters, a secret meeting was underway. 3 board members sat in a quiet lounge, away from Robert's gaze. Linda Shaw was there too, though technically she wasn't supposed to be. "This can't continue," one board member said, swirling the ice in his glass. "We're bleeding revenue. Investors are restless. Robert's obsession with crushing more is driving us into the ground." Linda spoke carefully, knowing the risk. Selina Moore isn't the enemy. She's the mirror. What she's showing the world is real. The only question is whether we'll admit it and change or double down until there's nothing left to save. Silence followed, heavy but decisive. For the first time, the possibility of negotiating openly with Equirise took shape in their minds. A week later, another blow landed. A cache of internal emails surfaced, leaked to the press. They revealed senior managers joking about problem passengers in ways that dripped with racism and contempt. One message read, "Just deny them upgrades. Cheaper than lawsuits." The outrage was immediate and ferocious. Hashtags calling for boycotts trended for days. Robert tried to frame the leak as taken out of context, but the damage was irreversible. Even longtime loyalists began whispering about his downfall. At Equirise, Adrian dropped the printouts of the leaked emails onto the table with a grim expression. "This is it. The smoking gun." Selina skimmed the lines, her stomach tightening. It wasn't just policy. It was culture, written in black and white. She looked up at her team. "The world sees what we've known all along, but we have to be careful. If this becomes about gloating, we lose the moral core. We're not here to humiliate, we're here to heal." Still, privately, Selina wrestled with anger. She remembered the sting of that day at the airport, the gate agent's dismissive eyes, the humiliation of being told she didn't belong. And now here was proof that such treatment wasn't an accident, it was an instruction. She wanted to rage. She wanted to see Robert and every complicit manager stripped of power. But she also remembered her mother's words, "Strength without compassion is just another form of cruelty. So when reporters pressed her for a reaction, she chose her words with care. I'm not surprised by these emails. Many aren't. What surprises me is that this culture was tolerated for so long. The question isn't whether the airline will apologize. The question is whether they will transform. Those words resonated. Even critics admitted she carried herself with rare balance, firm without being vindictive, principled without being sanctimonious. Meanwhile, Robert grew increasingly isolated. In one heated meeting, he barked at Linda. You've been undermining me from the start. Linda, exhausted, finally snapped. No, Robert, you've been undermining yourself. All I've done is tell you the truth you don't want to hear. The room fell silent. For the first time, Robert had no retort. He simply sank into his chair, staring at the table, the weight of reality pressing down. Outside that boardroom, the public kept watching. Talk shows speculated daily on how long Robert could last. Editorials demanded accountability, not just from him, but from every leader who had let discrimination fester. For many, this was no longer about one airline, it was about the entire industry. Selena sensed it too. One evening, standing before a crowd at a community forum, she addressed the bigger picture. Airplanes are symbols. They lift us into the sky, promise connection, carry us toward opportunity. But what does it mean when that promise isn't offered equally, when some are told, not you, not here, not today? This isn't just about flying. It's about belonging, and belonging should never be negotiable. The audience rose in applause, many with tears in their eyes. It was clear this story had transcended a corporate scandal. It had become a moral reckoning. And behind closed doors, the airline's leaders finally began to realize that Robert Lang's reign was no longer sustainable. A vote loomed. Choices had to be made. And the outcome would determine not only the future of the airline, but the trajectory of an entire industry watching closely. The board convened in the airline's highest tower, a floor sealed off from the noise of employees and reporters who crowded the lobby below. Outside, protesters waved signs demanding change, while journalists shouted into cameras, speculating whether Robert Lang would survive the day. Inside, the atmosphere was even more suffocating. The long oval table gleamed under harsh fluorescent light, but the faces surrounding it looked gray, worn, and divided. Robert strode in with his usual bravado, his tie perfectly knotted, but his eyes betrayed fatigue. He slammed a folder on the table. I've called this meeting to remind you who built this company. Me. Not some consultant with a YouTube following. Me. We've flown through worse storms. We'll fly through this one too. But the silence that followed wasn't one of admiration. It was one of calculation. Every board member knew the vote looming ahead would determine the airline's survival. Linda Shaw broke the quiet. Her voice was steady, but her eyes darted toward Robert. We've all seen the leaks, the customers who walked away, the investors who froze funding. If we continue under your leadership, Robert, we risk not only reputational collapse but financial insolvency. Robert leaned back, smirking. And what's your solution? Linda, hand the company over to Selena Moore. Maybe rename the airline after her too. At the mention of Selena's name, murmurs rippled. For weeks, her voice had guided the narrative. She had become not just the face of accountability, but the embodiment of hope. Meanwhile, across town, Selena sat with Adrian, Marisol, and Darius in Equirize's modest headquarters. They had been tipped off by an ally that the board's confidence in Robert was hanging by a thread. Yet Selena looked conflicted. Adrian tapped his pen against a legal pad. If they oust him, we'll be called to the table. This is our opening. Marisol, pragmatic as always, leaned in. Don't hesitate. Selina, you've been asking for systemic reform. This is the moment to secure it. If we wait, they'll install another figurehead and bury the changes. Selina folded her hands, staring out the window at the Chicago skyline. I know. But part of me wonders, are we fighting to remove a man, or are we fighting to redeem a system? Because if it's just about Robert, then nothing changes. Her doubt hung heavy. She thought of the employees who had written in, describing being silenced or punished when they tried to speak out. They didn't want revenge. They wanted a workplace where dignity wasn't negotiable. Back at the boardroom, the moment arrived. The chair of the governance committee stood, his voice grave. We will now vote on a motion of no confidence in CEO Robert Lang. Robert shot to his feet. This is betrayal. Every one of you rode my coattails to the top. And now, because of one woman's stunt, you're ready to throw me overboard. You'll regret this. But no amount of rage could stop the count. Hands rose slowly, deliberately, one by one. Board members who had once cheered Robert's victories now turned against him. Linda's hand was among the first. Frank Delaney, after a long hesitation, followed. By the time the tally ended, the result was undeniable. Robert Lang had been voted out. The news hit the press within minutes. Reporters outside erupted in a frenzy, cameras flashing, microphones shoved forward as the announcement crackled through speakers. Effective immediately, Robert Lang has been removed as CEO. An interim leadership team will be appointed while the board negotiates structural reforms. At Equirise, Darius burst into the room, waving his phone. It's done? He's out. Adrian grinned, a rare flash of satisfaction on his usually measured face. Then it's our move. They'll call us in next. Selina didn't celebrate. Instead, she felt a strange hollowness. She pictured Robert's face, not the angry mask he wore, but the exhaustion beneath it. Once, he might have truly believed he was building something noble. Somewhere along the way, fear and pride had twisted that into tyranny. She whispered under her breath, "It's not about him anymore. It's about everyone else who's still inside." The call came that evening. The board wanted to meet with Selina the following morning. That night, Selina wrestled with sleep. She rose from bed, paced her quiet apartment, and scribbled thoughts in a notebook. What demands matter most: mandatory bias training, an independent oversight committee, protection for whistleblowers. Her pen hovered. Then she wrote a single word across the page: belonging. The next morning, she walked into the same tower where Robert had ruled for decades. The protesters outside recognized her instantly. "Selina, Selina," they chanted, their voices carrying both hope and desperation. Inside, the board sat in the same oval room that had just ended Robert's reign. But now their posture was different, not combative, not dismissive, but cautious, even deferential. The chair spoke first. "Ms. Moore, thank you for coming. We need your guidance. Our customers, our employees, our investors. Everyone is demanding a path forward. What would it take to restore trust?" Selina didn't rush to answer. She let the silence stretch, forcing them to sit in their discomfort. Finally, she spoke. "What it takes is not a press release, not a token apology. It takes a transformation, and transformation begins with truth." She laid out her terms: a full, independent audit of every customer complaint over the past 10 years, a new board committee on equity, chaired by an outsider with real authority, whistleblower protections written into policy, with legal enforcement, mandatory bias and dignity training for every employee, from janitor to captain, and quarterly public reports measuring progress, not promises. The board members exchanged wary looks. One cleared his throat. That will be expensive and disruptive. Selina met his gaze, her tone firm but calm. More expensive than losing your airline. More disruptive than watching your stock collapse because customers no longer trust you. Dignity is not a liability. It's the only sustainable asset you have left. The room fell silent again. For the first time, the board realized they weren't negotiating with a consultant. They were negotiating with a conscience. Afterward, as Selina left the tower, the protesters outside erupted in cheers. She lifted a hand in quiet acknowledgement, but didn't linger. For she knew this wasn't the end. It was only the breaking point. The real work of rebuilding was about to begin. The sun had barely risen when Selina Moore and her team returned to the glass tower for a second round of talks. This time, the energy was different. The board had accepted Robert Lang's removal, but they had not yet accepted the full scope of change Selina demanded. There was money at stake, reputations on the line, and old habits that clung to survival. In the conference room, Adrian Blake laid his briefcase on the table and spread out a stack of documents. "We've formalized the terms Ms. Moore outlined yesterday," he said crisply. "Independent audits, whistleblower protections, mandatory training, and public reporting." Patricia Hale, the supervisor who had once tried to smooth over the gate incident, now sat at the far end of the table. Her jaw tightened. "You're asking us to air our dirty laundry every quarter. That's practically inviting lawsuits. Customers will use it against us." Selina's voice remained steady. "No. Customers will trust you because you're honest. Transparency is the only path back." Linda Shaw, visibly weary but supportive, nodded in agreement. "She's right. If we keep hiding, people will assume the worst. At least if we own our failures, we can prove we're fixing them." Frank Delaney crossed his arms, his gruff tone betraying his discomfort. "Mandatory training for pilots and crew? Do you know how much that will cost in overtime and delays? We can't ground flights for a social experiment." Marisol Vega leaned forward before Selina could respond. "This isn't an experiment. It's infrastructure. You ground planes for safety checks. Don't you think of this as a safety check for your culture? And frankly, a culture that alienates passengers is already unsafe." The room shifted, murmurs rising. The analogy struck a nerve. Even the most hardened board members understood the importance of safety protocols. Selina took a breath and softened her tone. "I know you're afraid. Change feels like loss. But the truth is, you've already lost more by resisting. Revenue is down. Loyalty is gone. You have one chance to rebuild trust. Don't waste it on excuses." For a moment, silence reigned. Then the chair of the governance committee asked, "And if we agree, Ms. Moore, what happens next?" Selina met his eyes. "Then we begin the hard part. Implementation, accountability, and listening not just to consultants, but to the employees and passengers whose voices have been ignored." The meeting ended without a decision, but cracks of agreement began to appear. Adrian, Marisol, and Darius could sense it. They had shifted the board from outright rejection to reluctant consideration. It was progress, but fragile. Later that day, Selina visited a group of flight attendants who had asked to meet privately. They were gathered in a modest union hall a few blocks from the airport. Some were wary, arms crossed, while others looked desperate for hope. One attendant, a young woman named Clara, spoke first. "Ms. Moore, We've been told to keep quiet when we see bias. I've watched colleagues target passengers unfairly. And when I spoke up, my supervisor cut my hours. How will your plan protect us?" Selena listened carefully, then answered, "With whistleblower protections written into policy, retaliation becomes grounds for termination. And with quarterly audits, your voices will be heard beyond your supervisors. You'll have channels that go directly to oversight committees." Another attendant, older and jaded, scoffed. "That sounds good on paper, but will it actually happen? Or is this just another speech?" Selena paused, then looked around the room. "I can't promise perfection, but I can promise this. I won't stop pushing until it's real. And if you join me, if you hold your leadership accountable too, then together we make it happen." The room fell quiet. A few attendants exchanged glances, then slowly nodded. Trust wouldn't come instantly, but the seed had been planted. Meanwhile, in the airline's executive suite, Patricia Hale vented her frustrations to a group of middle managers. "This woman is tearing apart everything we built. She wants to run us like a charity instead of a business." One manager hesitated. "But Patricia, isn't she right about the emails? About the way complaints were buried?" Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Don't be naive. Every company buries complaints. If we start dragging every grievance into the open, we'll never survive." Her words revealed what Selena already knew. Resistance wouldn't only come from the top. It would fester in the middle layers, the supervisors and managers who clung to old practices. That was where the real battle would lie. That evening, Selena met with her team at Equirise. Darius projected graphs on the wall. "Look at this. Customer cancellations spiked after the leaks, but they stabilize whenever Selena speaks publicly. The public trusts her more than the airline's own leadership." Adrian leaned back, steepling his fingers. "That's leverage. They can't rebuild without her credibility, which means we can push harder." Selena shook her head. "We push, yes, but not for power, for permanence. If we make this about me, it dies when I step away. We need systems that live beyond individuals." Marisol smirked faintly. "That's why you'll win. You're not chasing the spotlight. You're chasing change." The following morning, the board reconvened for another session with Selena. This time, the mood was less combative. They had seen the headlines, the union murmurs, the protesters still gathered outside. Denial was no longer an option. The chair cleared his throat. "Ms. Moore, we've reviewed your demands. Some we can accept outright. Others will require negotiation." Selena leaned forward. "Then let's negotiate. But remember, non-negotiables is dignity that cannot be delayed or diluted." The hours that followed were grueling. Adrian argued over legal language. Marisol calculated costs. Darius countered claims with data, proving that airlines with stronger equity measures retained more loyal customers. Slowly, clause by clause, the framework began to take shape. By late afternoon, they had a draft agreement. It wasn't final, but it was real. A path forward, written in ink. As Selena left the building, she paused at the doors, hearing the chants of protesters still echoing. For the first time, she allowed herself a small smile. The system had not yet transformed, but the tide had turned. She whispered quietly, as if to herself, "This is only the beginning." The first signs of transformation came quietly, almost invisibly. A memo circulated through Aurelius Airways announcing the creation of an independent equity oversight committee. For most employees, it was just another email in an inbox flooded with directives, but for a handful of flight attendants who had been silenced for years, it felt like the first gust of fresh air. Selena Moore knew the announcement was symbolic more than structural, but symbols mattered. She sat in Equirise headquarters with Adrian Blake, Marisol Vega, and Darius Cole, reviewing the next steps. This isn't the finish line, she reminded them. It's the test. If employees believe this is just cosmetic, we lose credibility before we start. Adrian tapped his pen against the draft policy. We need teeth, clear enforcement, legal ramifications, and protections. Otherwise, managers like Patricia Hale will keep doing what they've always done, bury complaints, and punish whistleblowers. Marisol raised a brow. Speaking of Patricia, she's been unusually quiet. That worries me. She was right to worry. In a break room at O'Hare International, Patricia was whispering with two other supervisors. They want us to hand over our authority to some oversight committee, she sneered. If we let that happen, our careers are finished. One supervisor hesitated. But Patricia, maybe they're right. Maybe we need to change. Patricia's expression hardened. Change is one thing, but letting outsiders tell us how to run operations, that's suicide. I won't stand by and watch this airline be dismantled. If they want to fight, I'll give them one. Her words were more than bitterness. They were a threat. Meanwhile, Selena received an invitation to meet with frontline employees in Atlanta, one of the airline's busiest hubs. The request came from a small group of mechanics and baggage handlers who had seen the headlines and wanted to speak directly. The meeting was held in a dimly lit union hall, its walls lined with faded posters about safety and solidarity. A middle-aged mechanic named Roy spoke first. Ms. Moore, we've seen executives promise reform before. It never trickles down. How do we know this isn't another false dawn? Selena looked him in the eye. Because this time, you'll be part of it. Oversight isn't just executives checking boxes. It's you, employees on the ground, with seats at the table. If managers retaliate, they'll be accountable. Not you. A young baggage handler raised her hand nervously. I've been here 3 years. Every time I try to suggest improvements, my supervisor laughs me off. Will anyone really listen now? Selena softened her tone. They'll have no choice, because if they don't, the system itself will expose them, and I'll stand with you to make sure of it. The employees exchanged cautious nods. Trust was still fragile, but Selena could feel it growing. For the first time, the people who kept the airline running were beginning to believe they had power. Back in Chicago, Adrian was reviewing leaked documents that had just arrived anonymously at Equirise. They revealed a troubling picture. A group of middle managers, including Patricia, had been discussing ways to undermine the new reforms. One line chilled him. If we create enough chaos, they'll abandon this oversight nonsense. Adrian immediately called Selena. They're planning sabotage. They want the reforms to fail so they can point and say, "See, it doesn't work." Selena listened in silence before answering. Then we need to be ready. If they try to create chaos, we'll show the world who's responsible. The sabotage came sooner than expected. A week later, a flight from Denver to Miami was delayed for hours due to a clerical error in crew scheduling. Passengers grew restless. Social media lit up, and headlines screamed about Aurelius's continued dysfunction. Internally, whispers pointed to Patricia's department. Marisol slammed her hand on the table when she heard, "This isn't incompetence, it's deliberate. They want to make it look like reform is breaking operations." Selena felt anger rising, but she forced herself to stay calm. Then we document everything. If this was sabotage, we'll uncover proof. And when we do, it won't just be a scandal. It'll be a lesson about why reform is necessary. Darius began analyzing logs and internal messages, piecing together a trail. Within hours, he found discrepancies, crew assignments altered manually, overrides hidden in the system. It was no accident. Armed with evidence, Selina requested an emergency meeting with the board. She laid the documents on the table, her voice unwavering. This delay wasn't a mistake. It was orchestrated by managers resistant to change. If you don't act decisively, the very people undermining your passengers will keep running your airline into the ground. The board members looked shaken. Linda Shaw spoke softly but firmly. She's right. If we don't root this out now, everything we've promised becomes meaningless. The board agreed to launch an internal investigation, but Selina knew that wasn't enough. Public trust required public accountability. She insisted on a statement acknowledging sabotage and reaffirming commitment to reform. It was risky. Airlines rarely admitted internal fractures, but the alternative was worse. When the statement went live, customers responded with surprising relief. Transparency, though painful, was more reassuring than silence. For the first time, Aurelius Airways' honesty earned a measure of goodwill. That night, Selina sat alone in her office, reflecting. She thought about Patricia and those like her people clinging to control, terrified of change. She wondered if anything could reach them, or if some battles had to be lost so others could be won. Her phone buzzed, a message from Roy, the mechanic in Atlanta. For what it's worth, we believe you. Don't give up on us. Selina smiled faintly. For every Patricia, there was a Roy. For every act of sabotage, a spark of solidarity. The tide was turning not because change was easy, but because people were deciding it mattered. The final confrontation didn't happen in a boardroom or at an airport gate, but in a cavernous ballroom in Washington, D.C., where Aurelius Airways had scheduled its annual leadership summit. Executives, managers, union leaders, and a handful of government regulators gathered under the glittering chandeliers. The event was meant to project strength and unity. Instead, it became the stage for a reckoning. Selina Moore stepped onto the platform, not as an invited guest, but as a shareholder and compliance partner with full authority to speak. Adrian Blake had secured the legal ground. Marisol Vega and Darius Cole were seated near the front, their faces calm but watchful. Cameras from 3 major networks pointed at the podium, waiting. Selina adjusted the microphone. 2 weeks ago, Aurelius Airways nearly collapsed under the weight of its own silence. A gate agent thought I didn't belong. A supervisor told me to accept less than what I paid for. And when I refused to disappear, the truth surfaced. This wasn't an isolated mistake. It was a pattern. It was a system. The room was so still that the air felt charged. Patricia Hale shifted uncomfortably in the third row. She had expected to be shielded by the crowd, but Selina's words cut through. This system, Selina continued, was designed to protect convenience, not dignity. It let some passengers breeze through without question, while others were asked, again and again, to prove they belonged. It let managers bury complaints until they became invisible. But today, invisibility ends. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Selina tapped the stack of papers in front of her. Here are 19 documented cases of discriminatory treatment at boarding gates in just 12 months. Here are the memos managers ignored. Here are the employee testimonies dismissed. And here is the proof of sabotage delays manufactured to make reform look impossible. Gas echoed. Some executives glanced at Patricia, whose face was now pale. Selina's voice softened but didn't waver. I don't stand here as someone seeking revenge. I stand here as someone who believes in flight, in the possibility of rising above what holds us down. But you cannot fly with anchors tied to your wings. If Aurelius wants a future, it must cut those anchors loose. Linda Shaw, the VP of Communications, leaned forward and whispered to a colleague. She's turning the narrative on its head. This isn't a scandal anymore. It's a rallying cry. Selina lifted her gaze. Today, Aurelius Airways will sign a binding agreement, an independent equity oversight committee with employee representation, mandatory DEI audits, full transparency to regulators, and zero tolerance for retaliation. This isn't optional. This is survival. For a moment, silence reigned. Then, one by one, employees in the audience began to clap. Mechanics in work uniforms, flight attendants in navy blazers, baggage handlers with calloused hands, they stood and applauded. The sound grew, echoing off the ballroom walls. Executives hesitated, caught between pride and fear, but the momentum was unstoppable. Patricia shot to her feet. This is madness. You're letting outsiders dismantle the company we built. Her voice cracked under the pressure. If you let this happen, you'll regret it. She doesn't care about Aurelius. She wants control. Selina met her eyes calmly. No, Patricia, I care enough to tell the truth when it's inconvenient. Control is what you're afraid of losing, because for years you've mistaken it for leadership. The applause thundered louder, drowning out Patricia's protest. Security approached discreetly, and she sank back into her seat, defeated. Later that afternoon, the board convened in private. Adrian presented the legal framework. Marisol outlined the operational roadmap, and Darius demonstrated how technology could track patterns of discrimination before they became crises. The vote was unanimous. Aurelius Airways signed the agreement. The news broke within the hour. Headlines blazed. Aurelius commits to sweeping reform after discrimination scandal. Hashtags surged. Dignity in flight. Equity takes off. Passengers who had once sworn never to fly Aurelius again posted cautiously hopeful messages. Other airlines scrambled, sensing a shift in industry standards. That evening, Selina returned to her hotel, exhausted but unable to sleep. She thought about the long road behind her, about her mother's double shifts, about the years of biting her tongue in boardrooms, about the countless times she had swallowed humiliation for the sake of moving forward. Tonight, she hadn't swallowed it. Tonight, she had named it. Her phone buzzed. A message from Roy, the Atlanta mechanic. Saw the live stream. You did it. We'll hold up our end down here. Another from the young baggage handler. Thank you for proving people like me matter too. Selina exhaled, tears pricking her eyes. She hadn't done it alone. The victory belonged to every person who refused to stay invisible. The next morning, she gathered her team in the Equirise office. The city was just waking. Sunlight streaming through the glass walls. We've set a precedent, she told them. But this isn't the end. Other companies are watching. Other passengers are waiting. Our job is to make sure this momentum doesn't fade into another hashtag. Adrian nodded. The law is on our side, but culture change takes persistence. They'll resist in quieter ways now. We have to keep watch. Marisol smiled wryly. Good. I never liked easy work anyway. Darius leaned forward. We're already getting calls from 2 other airlines. They want audits before the media comes knocking. Selina's lips curved into a small smile. Then let's help them, but not with shortcuts. If they want our name on their banner, they earn it. With numbers, with action, with accountability. The team dispersed, energized. Selina lingered, staring at the words written on the whiteboard. Expect better. She underlined them twice. That weekend, she visited her mother, who still lived in the modest house where Selina had grown up. Over tea at the kitchen table, her mother squeezed her hand. "I watched you on TV," she said. "I saw you stand tall. You've carried our story farther than I ever dreamed." Selina swallowed a lump in her throat. "It wasn't just mine, Mama. It was ours. And it's not finished yet." Her mother smiled knowingly. "It never is. But you've shown people what's possible. That's enough for now." As night fell, Selina stepped onto the porch, listening to the quiet hum of crickets. In the distance, she saw the faint glimmer of planes cutting across the sky. Each one carried hundreds of strangers' people with stories, burdens, and hopes of their own. She thought about the gate agent's face the day he told her she didn't belong. She thought about the supervisor's hollow smile, the passengers' curious stares, the humiliation of being pushed aside. But she also thought about the woman who had handed her a bottle of water, the mechanic who had dared to hope, the junior analyst who had asked if she was afraid. She wasn't afraid, not anymore. Selina whispered into the night, as if speaking to every unseen traveler in the sky. "You belong. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." And with that, she turned back inside, ready to continue the work. The story of Aurelius Airways would be remembered not as a tale of downfall, but of transformation. A moment when dignity demanded a seat, when silence cracked open, and when one woman's refusal to step aside reshaped an entire industry. Life teaches us that dignity is not a gift others hand to us. It is a truth we carry within. Selina Moore's story reminds us of something we've all felt moments when we were overlooked, dismissed, or told subtly or openly that we didn't belong. Many of us learn to stay silent, to avoid conflict, to let it go. But silence can also give permission for injustice to grow. Selina chose differently. She showed that calm courage can be stronger than loud anger. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the truth. By standing firm, she not only defended her own worth, she opened the door for others to be seen and respected. The lesson for us is clear no matter our age, status, or circumstances. We have the power to say, enough. We can insist on fairness, not just for ourselves, but for those who may not yet have the strength to speak. Justice is not always loud. It can be steady, patient, and rooted in quiet conviction. Let her story remind us that it's never too late to stand for dignity, because when we do, we teach the next generation that their worth is beyond question. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. Your time and attention mean the world. If this story moved you, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Together, we can spread stories that inspire dignity, courage, and justice. Stay connected. We have so much more to share with you.